Okay, so the next point I'm about to make is subtle, so try to stay with me on this. By now you know what a constructor is and what it does. Let's say I want to go back to the snowy day. In fact, I want to go back to where we were 2 videos ago before we ever started talking about constructors. So I'm going to comment out this one. This was the line of code that created the book using the parameterized constructor. I'm going to comment that out. And I'm going to bring all this back and go back to our original technique where we were creating the empty book first, and then we were going to use the properties to populate the private data. It's not as efficient, but that's what I want to do, okay? Right away, I'm noticing this. That was not here before. The compiler is complaining, okay? And the error says there's no argument given that corresponds to the required formal parameter t. I mean, it's really... this is not a user-friendly or beginner-friendly error message. Basically, the problem is this, okay? This is using a constructor. We're actually calling a constructor. So you were calling constructors and using constructors before we even started talking about constructors. You were using constructors last week. You were using constructors at the very first night of class when you started using objects in the framework class library. But you know, they were executing behind the scenes without you having to know about it. Okay, but now this is a problem because I started tampering with the constructor in the book class. So basically, we'll just say this: every class, whether you code it or it's in the framework class library, you know, like a text box or a button or something like that, those are all objects based on classes. But every class comes with what is called a default constructor. Okay, and the default constructor is something like this. I call it the nothing constructor. The nothing constructor, okay, because there's nothing in it, it's empty, it's not parameterized. This exists whether you type it or not, okay? And so that's why last week when you started coding your own objects without even having to think about constructors, they were working every time you create that object in memory. The nothing constructor, which was invisible at the time, was executing behind the scenes. And this is a subtle point. Once you start adding your own constructors, your own parameterized constructors, and start, you know, just like being conscious of constructors and adding them to a class, then the freebie, the nothing one, it's like revoked. And if you want to get it back, you have to code it. Okay, so like again, if you're not even going to think about constructors, then don't worry about it. It's there. You really don't have to know it. You don't have to type it out. But if you want to add your own more sophisticated constructor, parameterized constructor, and you still want access to the nothing constructor, you have to go back and type out the nothing constructor. It's a weird thing. It's not just C#. Other languages are like this too. So my advice to you is just always add the two. Add the nothing constructor, whether you're going to use it or not. And then your parameterized constructor, which is going to, you know, be more functional and, you know, have a purpose to initialize the private data. This one, like, literally does nothing. So it would create an empty object if you want that empty object. So I go back here, and that angry red line has gone away because I went back and added the default constructor. One more point I want to make about this. We have 2 methods, right? They're special, they're constructors, but they're methods nonetheless. Same exact name, different parameter lists. Remember those 2 criteria? Those are overloaded methods, or specifically overloaded constructors. Same exact name, different parameter list. This one's is empty. This one has 4 parameters. That's different, right? So these are overloaded constructors, okay?